How weird is it naming a child after a living parent if religion or inheritance aren't factors? Imagine you're an alien from an Andromeda galaxy and you've flown galactic air all the way to Earth to meet the humans. While you're visiting, you're invited to see a birth, a real, live human birth, the child of the ambassador you're staying with. The ambassador is having a son, and it's beautiful, albeit a little gross to watch. It's a tiny, squirming pink human, ready to be stuffed full of calculus and episodes of Young Sheldon. But then you notice the nurse is holding up form for the father to fill out. When he's asked to write in the new human's name, the father says, "Just copy my name into the boxes, please." Weird, right? Humans haven't mastered cloning, have they? No, they haven't. But the dad wants the boy to be called the same thing as him. Then it gets even weirder. The father takes a look at the newborn and asks the doctor, "Could you also make his genitals look like mine too? Whether it's cut or uncut, for tradition or health, just make it match mine." The ambassador you met isn't religious. He's not bequeathing some noble title onto his firstborn, which could only be inherited if he has the same earthly name and penis. It's just custom. Because whatever we haven't accomplished in life as humans, we kind of put it on our children to pick up the slack, pretty much from day one. Welcome to Earth, where narcissism is the inalienable right of a parent. You're listening to The Re-Engineered You. This is a podcast about self-empowerment and all the myths, lies, and misconceptions we tell ourselves. Then we use science and history to bust those myths and re-engineer a better you. I'm your host, Todd Laments, the extrovert.
And I'm the writer, researcher, and introvert, Joe Anthony, whose job it is to dig through the outer layer of no-dawn on the internet and get to the facts.
Actress Leighton Meester had a narcissistic mother, allegedly. Her mother, Constance, stole the money Leighton was sending home from her acting gigs, to the tune of $7,500 a month, which was supposed to go to her brother's medical care. But Mama Constance used the medical allowance for her own cosmetic procedures, and when she was confronted about it, Constance threatened to sue even more if her daughter didn't raise it to $10,000 a month. Again, allegedly, but a judge did rule in Leighton Meester's favor back in 2012. Drew Barrymore's mom used her daughter's fame to get into fancy nightclubs. For 8 years, Matthew McConaughey couldn't tell his mother the details of his life, since she made a habit out of running to the tabloids with any gossip-worthy news he shared. Can narcissistic parents make for well-rounded children? We know narcissists can make more narcissists. That's as old as kings having a little tyrant princess who terrorize a village. But on today's episode, we want to ask, what happens when you're born out of a me environment? We have 3 myths to get us started. Myth 1. Can the apple really fall that far from the tree? Can toxic, selfish parents create well-rounded children? Or are they just better at hiding it? Myth 2. Narcissism in parents all looks the same, right? It's just people trying to live through their kids. Drunk dads at t-ball games, screaming at the umps. Myth 3. All of our examples so far are narcissistic parents creating humble geniuses. So if narcissism works, why stop? We're going to dig into the dynamic between narcissistic parents and humble children and discuss which one wins in the end. But first, I want to tell Joe about the most extreme example I could find. Some of our friends and our listeners give us ideas for shows and give us feedback and actual research. And I want to give a shout out to Nikki, who helped do some writing on this and gave us some ideas. And she is an entrepreneur. She's in real estate and she's a good friend. Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you, Nikki.
I want to talk about one of my favorite activities. My favorite meditation sport is yoga. I do yoga 4 times a week. I'm a huge yogi.
Okay.
So our first narcissistic parents is the infamous Bikram yoga. Have you heard of this guy?
I have not, actually, until you put this on the doc. I thought you were trying to convince me to do a yoga episode, honestly, until we started working on this one.
Well, this man is there's some dispute. What he took is he took a very basic old, thousands of year old yoga, and he kind of rebranded it. And it's called Bikram yoga, and it's hot yoga.
Now, okay, so hot yoga I have heard of. There's a hot yoga studio in downtown.
Bikram is, what's different about Bikram from a regular hot yoga is it's the same sequences of 26 positions.
Now, did he invent hot yoga in general and like he has his own flavor of it? Or was this like he moved in on hot yoga?
He just rebranded this 26 postures.
So he took something that to me looks super uncomfortable to begin with, realized that people were cranking the temperature up to make something uncomfortable also sweaty, and then he brought in 26 poses.
26 poses, and this was already established, but when he put his name on it, it got a following. He started, I'll kind of regress here and tell you how he started.
Please.
He started in, of all places, Beverly Hills.
Okay.
The famous and the rich. And when he started, he didn't have anything. He'd sleep on the floor of his studio, didn't even have his own private residence. And then as he started to get more popular, he got some celebrities, and that really spiraled rocket shipped his success.
Okay, so I want to stop you right there for just a second. Doesn't it feel like most of the people, like Bruce Lee origin story, where like they had they were sleeping on the floor, they had their own little studio, but it's all they had. That almost feels like it would work better in Hollywood, where everybody is like sharing, their best yoga teacher, or like, oh, you gotta talk to my nutritionist.
Yeah, and it's the more dirt poor they are, the more they put their arm around them.
Yeah, the more they're sought after, right?
So many stories jump in my head. I think of Steven Seagal being in Hollywood at the right time. I think of Anthony Robbins, where he had all these actors and actresses support him in the beginning,
right,
which gave him huge credibility and huge free advertising. So he does this thing, there's 26 poses, and he is phenomenal at it. It's not uncommon. His practice his school starts to grow. And if you check out the Netflix video on this, it's amazing. You're going to see 400 people all doing hot yoga. And he's hooked up, and he's in a bikini, and he is just putting on it. He's a showman. It is not an exercise class. This is not like you do at 24-Hour Fitness or at your local gym. This is an absolute performance.
He's wearing the headpiece like he is giving a motivational speech, but it's at freaking yoga.
Very slowly come up, all the way up, and you relax. You have no idea what's happening right now in your legs, body. When you'll be 65, you'll never have gout in your toes, your knees, your hips, or anything. Second set.
And it's half motivational speech. A lot of times, the yoga school I went to, the instructors they'd do a life lesson, and they'd weave it through just like a speech, and they connect it all at the bottom and give you a takeaway, believe it or not. So it's kind of like church a little bit.
Right.
And to some people see yoga, the meditation part and the quieting the mind, and it's pretty darn close to praying.
Yeah. Sermon plus stretches and exercise.
Now you think, what's the harm in this? We got this brilliant Indian yoga people. These rich people want to come throw money at them. You didn't ask me how much money they threw at them.
I was going to get to that. Are we talking like...
what are you thinking?
Okay, so Hollywood yoga. I'm guessing I'm going to go wild. I'm going to say $500,000 a year.
Well, this is what happened. His real big money, I mean, he had classes of 300 to 400 people daily running all day long. He would have teacher training, so this Bikram yoga would travel around the country and around the world, so they could set up their own schools and use his name, like a franchisee would with Subway or McDonald's. And so these students would come, and they would pay $10,000 for a 9-week class. So they go to a luxury hotel in Hollywood or in Beverly Hills, rent the place out, rent out a whole bunch of rooms. That's just for the tuition. They still had to pay for the room and everything else.
Okay. And
so,
that's you said like hundreds of students?
It wasn't uncommon there for to be 300-400 students in a class. And these ran year round.
Okay,
They don't know exactly how much he made. There's different tax things. The law enforcement was after him for a while, but they said he made at least $75 million.
So my guess was off by factors of 10. So, okay.
You and everyone else's, Joe. He had a fleet of very expensive Rolls Royces, Bentleys. He went from this very humble sleeping on the floor to an absolute jackass.
This sounds like Pinky Bhagwan. I mean, like, it is starting to sound like a cult leader who says, "Give me your vehicles."
Well, so the problem came once he started getting really successful. He started to be very, very verbally abusive to his students and his teachers' students. It wasn't uncommon for him to make homophobic slurs or to call people fat, disgusting pigs. One of his lines, he's screaming out later, I'll quote him here, "You Miss Teeny Weeny Bikini, spread your legs," and he would kick her.
You can have marathon sex, 72 hours non-stop. And this is called natural Viagra.
So you're going to a class and someone's calling you a fat ass and and he's saying it's doing it to make you grow, like break you down to build you back up.
Okay, that sounds like high school gym class.
This is where he started to get in real trouble. It's okay to charge whatever for your class. It's okay to franchise. What's not okay is to verbally abuse people. And he just got so full of himself, he started to see himself as something other than human. He started seeing himself as a guru, that he was enlightened and that he could do whatever he wanted. And he started to take advantage of students of his teacher training.
Okay.
Multiple women have filed charges of sexual assault, rape charges, all kinds of inappropriate things too. And so he pretty much just fled the country to get away from these legal problems.
Holy shit. Okay. Well, that's a twist.
So he packed up the Bentleys. So it went from being this humble, local, super, it's a new kind of yoga that is good for your health and good for your mental health and good for your physical health.
Sleeping on his yoga mat, teaching people real health.
To Bentley driving, living in mansions, being just rude and a horrible human being, verbally abusing and physically abusing people, and then now sexually abusing at the end.
Okay. So, sorry to interrupt the flow, but this episode is about narcissistic parents. Would it be safe at this point to call Bikram a narcissist?
1,000%.
Okay.
What else do you have to do? I think
if you go to the Hollywood Award for narcissists, they give you a narcissisty, which is a gold award of Bikram. Like they hand you a little gold man, and it is him.
Even just the way that he wore that shameless Speedo bikini thing,
yeah,
just shows you like he's in a different world.
Yeah, you can't walk around with that little diaper thing on without. Yeah, you have to think a lot about yourself to be able to do that.
And he's a balding little, not a particularly fit guy himself.
Yeah.
For him to be going around insulting everybody, who those people he's insulting could probably have more. They could probably be teasing him.
Right. Yeah. Looking at pictures of this guy, like he's got supermodels behind him. He's insulting them, and he looks like he had a couple too many beers at like football night, like that he spends a lot of time in those Bentleys and couches.
Well, that takes us to his daughter. He's a father. Now, how adjusted do you think his daughter, Laju, is? She's a grown woman now in her 20s.
I would assume that any child of Bikram's is a flaming wreck. That they are, I mean, the rebellion for a narcissistic parent like that has to be big and large. Like you have to outdo your parents, right?
Well, I would think that she would have lived in a lap. She's 26 years old today. And so she has lived with these mansions and all this fame that her father has. At first it was fame, now it's infamy.
Yeah.
She has started her own yoga practice. And she, even though she stays away from talking down about her father, she also doesn't say he's innocent. So what's your take on that? It's a weird place for her to be. So she's a woman. She's a young woman. How would she feel about one of her friends or her sisters being sexually assaulted?
You would think that if your parent fled the country because their business was after him.
And he's been, multiple women have been awarded millions of dollars from the things he's done.
So
in civil suits, yeah.
To the public eye, he's as guilty as sin, and he is like fled the country.
But nothing says guilty like
right.
For someone who's very established, you know.
And she comes up right behind that flaming airplane wreckage that he's left of his life, and she starts a business in the wreckage. That is so crazy to me.
To me, it shows that she's grounded, that she, still says that she loves her father. Her mother actually divorced her father after all these accusations of sexual, of affairs and sexual assault.
She got half the Bentleys.
Yeah. But she stands up for her mom. She says, my mom is my hero. My mom, as a woman, decided that she wasn't going to be treated that way in a marriage and left. And that shows that she's really down to earth to me.
Okay, I can respect that.
And I also respect kids who actually go out and do their own business. Because let's face it, they don't have to work if you got $75 million.
Although it would be pretty sweet as a teenager to get a luxury car for your first car. So I kind of looked her up just because I don't know why, but I was imagining like the female Jack Osborne. Like I was expecting somebody who their life had been through 4 lifetimes in one, even before they hit age 30. She looks so well-rounded, and she looks like an Instagram model. Like, I know that's what a life gorgeous. Of yoga. Yeah.
She's glowing. Yeah, beautiful is not really a fair word for her. We need to invent something.
Yeah, she doesn't have pores, and she light follows her.
She's exotic-looking Indian, very beautiful. All Indian people are beautiful, too.
Right, and I was... After you put this in the doc, I went looking for dirt. Like, I wanted to hear her saying something wild on the side, but all of these quotes from her from the Women's Health online magazine, they were all so humbling and nice. Like, I wanted to dislike her.
Well, that's what she says about how much she loves yoga. She has a genuine love for yoga. She sees how participants were able to wash away stress in their daily lives when they practiced it. And this is a benefit she also saw in her own life. She said, I know the power of yoga. For me, it's a constant that keeps me sane. Amidst a hectic life, I love to live.
That's a lot less messy child of a rich person than I was expecting, honestly.
So down to earth. And this is my favorite quote I could find from her. This is what she says at 26 years old. Besides my parents, nobody knows Bikram yoga better than I. It's been part of my life since I was born, and virtually every day for 26 years.
That's amazing.
That's generational business, right?
It is, yeah. I guess there is something to be said for seeing your parent, like, sink a ship and then know to avoid the iceberg after you watch them do that. Is that okay, I don't want to jump way, way ahead on our episode, but do you think maybe that's part of the takeaway that, like, Leighton Meester, Matthew McConaughey, Drew Barrymore, Bikram, that might be the connecting tie, is they have messy parents, but it's because they get to watch them sink ships and wreck their own businesses and lives.
Well, Joe, tell me about as you grew up. In my family, when the kids did something wrong, the parents would blame the friends and say and then if our parents got in trouble at work, we automatically thought whoever was at work, the boss or the coworkers, were picking on them, that they were the best thing that ever happened, right? You're on that team.
Right.
Was that the same with you?
Yeah. If my father ever had a problem at work, he would tell us that he worked for 3 people. Like he did the work of 3 people, and somebody higher up disliked him as a person, and it was them attacking him. Like, it was much like our Lee Iacocca episode. But in reality, of course, if you do the work of 3 people, nobody gets rid of you.
Exactly. Do you think that's what happens with these really narcissistic, that they push the line so far with their power and their control and their just nastiness that you just can't ignore it anymore? You have to say, look, I am not going to be like my dad. I am not going to be like my mom. I see some of the strong things, some of their strong suits, but I am not going to do the negative stuff.
I wonder how crazy the parent has to be to make that happen, because there's a lot of we'll call them like drunk football dads or baseball dads or like dance moms, where they will not be Bikram crazy. Like they're not, Bentleys and sex scandals. They are just like light narcissism, where they are like, I made it to the middle class and I deserve everyone else's pie too. I wonder if you have to have a certain amount of insanity to make your kids scared straight, like to make them scared into humble and well-rounded.
Well, let's face it too, the parent needs to be a little obsessive for the kid to get that many reps in whatever it is, whether they're playing an instrument or playing football. They have to drive them all to practice, pay for all that stuff for years. They do it from when they're tiny, so they can't be all there.
Right.
They have to be a little bit.
Either that or they're just, this cannot be the case. I'm making a joke, but maybe it's just everybody gets raised by the maid, and the maid is well-rounded.
Well, how does a 4-year-old know that they like football, baseball, the piano?
Right.
They don't know. They don't know if they're a ballet dancer until we tell them.
Yeah, the kid is like, I love going to these dance competitions and sweating and having people put plastic on my face for an hour. Oh my. Okay. So I guess the first question, if we're getting to the science portion, do you want to ask the question, do we have narcissistic parents?
You and I personally?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, let's figure this out. My parents are just weird.
Yeah.
Are your parents weird?
Willfully. I think that, I don't think they're weird. I think my parents were just confused, honestly. But certainly narcissists. Like, as we go through this, you may see me curl up into a fetal ball at the end of the table here.
Learn me, teach me.
So anyone listening to this may ask the same question we are asking. No, my parents did not own a yoga studio where they abused 400 people at a time. But you don't have to have that red flag of a narcissist. You can simply have a parent who hits a couple of these markers. And narcissism comes in 3 different flavors when it comes to parents. It is not always, Bikram screaming at people or Matthew McConaughey's mom giving secrets to the tabloids. So we're going to go through these. And I do want to remind everybody, because we're identifying, we're trying to spot the road signs for a narcissistic parent. Todd and I are not doctors. We start every episode where we delve into, a little bit of psychology. We do not have PhDs. We don't have doctor in front of our names. We are reading from other people's good sources, and we really recommend you check these out. We're having them linked to our page. If you follow the episode notes, you can follow our same information.
We're not to be a narcissist, but we are very well read, Joe.
That is true. Yeah, we do read a lot of articles on our lunch breaks. Now, the thing that everybody kind of knows, a narcissist is somebody who has an inflated sense of self-importance. And we have talked about on other episodes that malignant narcissism and the danger of narcissism is knowing that you are important and having that go against reality. So the idea that I'm the most important thing on earth and evidence to the contrary will be ignored. If somebody tells me I'm not the best, I will simply fire back with, no, you. Now, narcissism is not a diagnosis in itself. You can have things that come with narcissism. You can have a narcissistic personality without having what's called NPD, which is narcissistic personality disorder. And narcissists aren't necessarily abusive. Some narcissists are perfectly capable of living normal lives. Just mentally, on the back burner, they think that everything is about themselves. I'm going to quote the article here, and this is from The Mighty. They talk about, the classification of narcissism. They say, quote, "A narcissistic parent is someone who lacks the capacity to consistently care for and honor the dignity, well-being, and personhood of the child in a way that the child requires for their adequate emotional and mental development." Narcissism in a parent, to summarize that paragraph, it just means they're really bad at looking at their child as an individual and giving them the growth they need.
Well, tell me that. What does that look like if you're a 5-year-old? What does a narcissistic parent do different from a regular or a great parent?
It looks like a parent who is more concerned with themselves than the child. And the more extreme the case of narcissism, the more likely you are to see physical abuse. So
some of it can be just neglect.
Yeah, it can be neglect. It can be a parent that doesn't want to address your needs. It can be a parent that wants to take over the conversation when in reality, as a kid, you really need something emotionally, and they instead talk about themselves. It can look like it can look like physical abuse too. It can look like, you interrupt mom's conversation and you get slapped. So
I had a relationship, and I know that the parent of this kid went to the dentist all the time, but never took their kid to the dentist. Made sure they always bought new clothes, but never bought them for the kid. Just, and that sounds not humongous things, not beating stuff, but it adds up.
Yeah, you put all those things together, and the parents' needs are bigger than the kids' needs. They make a quote here. This is by Craig Malkin, PhD. He says, "All narcissists are addicted to feeling special. They just go about feeling special in different ways." So we may not all start a yoga studio, but we will find ways to make ourselves feel special if we are a narcissistic parent.
Maybe at the football game.
Yes.
Or the cheerleader practice.
Right, look how good my kid is at this. He got that from me. Now, according to Dr. Malkin, there are 3 basic types of narcissistic parent. And here's the part where we really get into the identification. Like, if you're listening to this and you're like, well, my parent never prioritized themselves over my dental appointment, I may read some of these and kind of turn your head a little bit. The first is the one we've been talking about. Of the 3, this is the classic narcissist. They're not really interested in who the child actually is. They more see the child as an extension of themselves and what they wanted to be. They boast about their child's accomplishments as if they're their own. Like we're saying, my kid is great at baseball. Got that from me, definitely. I'm the winner here. They shame or belittle a child's accomplishments, especially if they feel threatened. So if your parent has ever looked at your winning science fair project and been like, nah, that's all right, it could be better. And they only show love to a child if they act in a way that is pleasing, like they withhold love if the child doesn't bend to their desires.
Conditional love.
Conditional love. That is a perfect way to put it. Now, that is the obvious classic narcissistic parent. Here's where Dr. Malkin gets into the 2 that snuck up on me and kind of scared me a bit. There's one called the covert narcissistic parent. They are quiet. They are socially avoidant. They couldn't care less about money or fame. This is somebody you're not going to see like Bikram screaming at 400 people in a yoga studio. Instead, they just say that their pain is bigger than anyone else's, including their child's. And they react with anger at any suggestion that they've made mistakes.
So whatever they're going through.
Yeah.
Ups and downs of life. Their
exactly.
car accident, their arthritis, their job problems are way worse than Joe's job problems.
Yeah, they are basically the one-uppers of pain, and it's manipulative. In fact, if you have a narcissistic parent, especially a covert narcissist, you're going to feel manipulated a lot. And that even includes them realizing it and telling you that. One of the classics is for a covert narcissist to tell you, oh, I'm such a horrible parent. And they're doing it to prompt their kids to disagree with them and reassure them, no, mom, you're really good. You know, you're awesome at this parenting thing.
I had a horrible boss who used to do this to me. He would say, Todd, I feel like I'm failing you in the sales team. And I would do that same thing, Joe. Even though I hated this bastard, I'd put my arm around him and go, no, Jared, you're not.
Right.
You're doing a great job. It's I swear to God.
Just push through, buddy, and you realize that he's supposed to pep talk you. Yeah, leaning on children for emotional support and self-esteem, playing favorites among children, favoring the one who is the most supportive or give them the validation. Again, it's really mostly about one-upping the child's struggles. Whatever they're facing, it's more difficult than anything the kid could face.
That's a hurtful one, playing favorites among the children, though.
Yeah.
When you feel it because your parents do like the other kid more than you, your sibling more than you.
Right.
That hurts.
The part about this that hit me hardest was reading about how narcissistic parents feel entitled to having the children take care of them. Like, I had kids. Why aren't my kids taking care of me emotionally? That one struck me. Like, it was like, oh yeah, no, that is the trick my parents used. There's also this one's called the covert narcissist, but the next one and the third type is even more sneaky, to me. This is called the communal narcissistic parent. And this is sort of like the most helpful parent. They are empathetic and nurturing to the people around them. They believe that they're volunteering nonstop. They are doing for others nonstop. But they also believe their good deeds set them apart from everybody else. And they crave to be validated in this.
Oh, I know people like this. Yeah, it's a social ranking, right?
Exactly. When I first read this, I did not have this experience, but I could think of people's parents that were like this. To quote the article, they say, quote, disordered communal narcissists are apt to leave their kids feeling like the most selfish person alive if they can't recognize how generous and caring their parent is. So
I can see them rushing if one of the kids is hurt from a sport or from an activity with cookies, and then advertising the fact with email and text, and telling while they're baking the cookies, telling everybody about it. What a great mom they are.
Yeah, they're
this constant promotion.
That's what it feels like. The PR firm of mom. It's the PTA person who puts the most time in, or the churchgoer, or the community organizer. But they also have to announce how much it's costing them, that it's, they're sapping all their money and time into this.
This covert narcissistic parent that's sneaky.
Yeah.
Because that looks like Mrs. Brady. That looks like Mother of the Year.
Yeah, the communal narcissist is you should be giving them an award, and they are one step from Mother Teresa, but they will remind you of it. And the big part about this as a parent, if that doesn't sound like it's damaging, the damaging part is that they have to put down their child whenever the child asks for attention and emotional support. They have to tell the kid that, the child's needs are petty and shallow, and they don't compare or stack up to the needs of whoever they're servicing. So, our big examples today are narcissistic parents who fall into the classic narcissist, but there are the other two, the covert and the communal narcissist. So if you feel like you have been, let's say, if you feel like your childhood might have been robbed a little by a parent who falls into one of these categories, please, you have permission to seek help. You never need permission to seek help. You should be, I really do believe everyone should spend some time in therapy. But it would be a really good idea to just talk to somebody. You don't even have to go to a therapy session. Just reach out to a professional and say, hey, I may have had a narcissistic parent and it may have hurt.
My parents weren't perfect, but they don't really fit any of these bills.
You didn't have a one of these narcissistic types?
No. Again, not perfect.
If you'd like, we will have a whole episode about your parents, and we'll find out exactly what's wrong with you. I'm so kidding, by the way. That's not happening. I've met your mother. I love her.
Yeah, no, we can get on her bad side. My mom's tough, though. She beat the shit out of us.
I believe it. She will beat us with our own yoga mats. So, not as a diagnostic question, we're kind of going off script here, but do you think that there are people who are like narcissists about their own genius? And do you think it's ever deserved? Like, can you look at somebody who is genuinely very smart and be like, yeah, you deserve to be that narcissistic?
Their brain is their bully. They're better than you. They can outthink you. They can outmaneuver you. A lot of adults I know have this. I'm so great at my job. I do so much. I do the work. We talked offline about adults we know who brag about doing the work of 3 people.
Right.
Which we know is impossible.
Right.
And if they did the work of 3 people, nobody would mess with them at all.
It's funny you mentioned this. I was just having a discussion yesterday, and it was the idea that, is somebody special because they have a really good job, or are they just really specialized? Like, are they doing something anyone could do if they were given enough training and time?
And I think the politically correct thing that everybody says is, and I'm talking about the people who are super smart, they're going to say things like, well, we're all geniuses in our own field. And that's true, but there's certain people that feel like because of their position in life, because of how many people answer to them at work, because of where they went to school, they are better than you.
Yeah.
And they'll kind of let you feel it with their micro expressions and then with just the way they act. And they feel the same way about their kids. Their kids are more important than your kids because they're what? They're geniuses' kids.
Right. Yeah. Do you ever meet somebody in a field that is supposed to be a genius and you're like, oh my God, how did you start doing this? Like, you are barely holding it together as a human. So I kind of want to talk about the junior-senior dynamic. So question for you. Are you a Todd Laments Jr.?
No, I'm just a Todd.
Okay.
My parents went to a Todd Rundgren concert, got stoned when my mom was pregnant with me, and they named me after the lead band.
Oh, okay. Wow.
They didn't get a baby book. They didn't name me after, some war hero or a family member. Are you a Joe Jr.?
No, my father joked that the nurse named me, that like she came in and she's like, you look like a Joe.
Not a lot of thought in a Joe or Joseph though, right?
No, I found out it was from a family. It was a family name.
Okay. Todd's 1 syllable, so that's not very thoughtful at all. It's not short for anything either.
They just uttered a syllable and that was it. My older brother is a junior. He is the 3rd, I believe, of his name, which honestly, if you're inheriting nothing or like a trailer or like, there's a certain part where it just feels like narcissism to name your kid after you. Like, what are they getting? Like, what are you honestly passing on?
Well, that's what I've always noticed. I always thought that every single man that I have known, women don't name their daughters after themselves. They usually name them after their
grandmothers,
grandma, or somebody in their family that they just look up to.
Yeah, that makes so much more sense to me.
But the men that I have known personally, without exception, are the biggest assholes who name their son after themselves. They are, and you almost to the point where you're shocked.
It's like my father. Yeah,
you're shocked, but you're not shocked.
Yeah, yeah.
All this names again. This baby book, you could give the kid Caesar or something, some grand name, some thoughtful prince, king, princess.
There's a Seth Rogen raunchy comedy called Observe and Report. It's like the gross version of Paul Blart Mall Cop, and he's this guy comes out of like a trailer park and he starts screaming about like, that's my kid, that's my seed, that's my legacy, and it's like, but what legacy? What are you leaving them? Why would we name somebody a junior if you are the senior? What are you trying to hand them?
Now, for the listeners out there, I know I'm going to be confronted on this. I know I'm going to get some nasty stuff. So If you are, I want to meet you, and then we'll make a decision based on that. I'll judge you in person myself.
If you are emailing us and you are a junior and your father is senior, you got to tell us in the email that you're complaining from, what does your father do? What did he pass on to you? Because if it's anything less than Bikram yoga, I'm going to be disappointed and your argument isn't valid. So we have an example of the junior-senior dynamic where a very classic but little-known senior basically got his son fired, from what I'm understanding. And you can correct me if I got this wrong. But we want to talk about the humility and humbleness that can come from having a genius, narcissist senior parent. And you gave me this example, so I'm going to let you take it from here because I just saw you put this in the doc, and I was like, that's a beautiful story.
Well, this is about the company Black & Decker, who make the power tools. Do you know it's a couple of dudes, Joe? Black & Decker were two different guys.
Because it sounds so, to my brain, I've always had a Black & Decker drill, so it's always to me felt like just the name of the tool. So it was crazy to look at this and be like, oh, those are people.
Yeah, there was S. Duncan Black and Alonzo G. Decker. And when they got into this business, it was before the Great Depression, so it was the early 1900s. And power tools were these big, massive things. They weren't used for small projects. They weren't supposed to fit in your hand. They were big, major machinery. And that's how they changed modern power tools. They made them smaller, and so everybody could use them.
It's like a power drill looked like a jackhammer, basically.
Exactly. It did the same thing, but it wasn't affordable for people to have them in their house. Black and Decker both grew up in rural America. It's outside of Baltimore, but they had very, very different upbringings. Black was a little bit well established. He had middle-class family. He had everything he needed. He was loved. Decker had it very tough. Decker's father died when he was only 7 years old, and he actually had to drop out of school after the second grade. Second grade.
That is crazy.
To support his family. And he started working in a foundry, right? And he worked with Leighton molten brass. Sounds dangerous, too. And this is before, kid labor laws, right?
Have you ever seen a middle schooler walk in and be like, gee, sir, can I pour some molten metal? And you're like, yeah, here you go. Here's your gloves.
It gets burned at work. He needed to get out of it. It was backbreaking work. So he got a job with a less taxing job. It's called Boyden Air Brake. So he got there, even though he wasn't educated, he became an engineer. They saw how smart this kid was, and he flourished.
Holy hell. Do you think maybe he was such a genius at tools because he was using molten freaking metal since he was in middle school?
It's an amazing story, and we're going to have the notes just to follow what all these guys went through. They ended up working with his future business partner called Roland Telegraph Company. So they got together, and they used both of their skill sets and made this company.
Okay.
What does this have with narcissistic parents or high-earning parents? Alonzo Decker, during the Great Depression, had to lay off the companies. A lot of companies almost went out of business, right?
Right.
And just to give you an idea, industrial production from 1929 to 1933 fell by 47%. So just things being made went to half. Unemployment was up to ungodly 20%.
That's why people weren't building stuff, is because during the Great Depression, there wasn't enough money to build new things. So industry cut down. So this is still during their telegraph days, right? Or have they invented
They've already formed Black & Decker.
Okay.
They started their own company, yeah.
Can we talk about the pistol moment?
Oh, please.
The part that stuck in my brain. So they go from the telegraph company, and these two geniuses are sitting around the dinner table, and they're trying to invent something. Like they're literally thinking about power tools and how to make them more accessible so that instead of being the size of a, like I said, a jackhammer, How can we make a drill accessible to everybody? And now this also tells you something about their era. They had a .45 pistol sitting on the counter. Like somebody had just taken it out of their holster and just set it down. And they look over at the pistol, and one of them picks it up. I think it was Decker. And he's like, what if we took this pistol handle and attached it to a drill? And that basically was the foundation for all power tools that we know today. Like, they made a drill with a pistol handle. And then from there, everybody was like, oh, we can take all of these tools in our shop and put a pistol handle on it.
Isn't that crazy? Something literally is right in your face.
Right, yeah.
Like, let's just put a handle on it if we want it in people's hands.
Yeah. So imagine being that guy's son. Like, Decker does this, and then you have to follow that. You're Decker Jr., and this guy just invented power tools.
After World War II, I'm going to share mine now, my favorite one from Black & Decker, because this one I love too.
Please.
They were having problems with all these tools being gone. They thought they were breaking. So they went out, Black & Decker went to all the factories to see what was happening with their tools. Well, it turned out that the women, because all the men were away at war in World War II, were taking them home to use them at projects at their house. And they said, oh, shit. We're not just going to make these for commercial. These are for, and at the time, that was seen as just ludicrous. Like, people don't need tools at their house.
Their delicate lady hands are walking off with these commercial industry tools, and they realize
I love it. They're stuffing them up their skirts and everything. Yeah. Right? And they're probably like setting up, you pull the car around and we'll steal two today.
Right. These ladies are pit crewing their way through life because they've been working in these factories, which is also awesome.
Now, Alonzo Decker had a son, and he named him after himself.
Decker Jr.
Decker Jr. Now, when the Great Depression started, like I said, half of production in this country stopped. What usually happens with the prince and princesses, the owner's kid, when a company starts doing layoffs?
I was going to say golden parachute, but honestly, it's more like a golden landing pod. Like, they are protected, and like Ford's son, they are given like the prized, untouchable position in the company.
They're put in a safe and never touched, and they get raises when everyone else is getting laid off.
Exactly.
Not Decker. He treated his junior harsher than everybody else. Even though his son was educated, his son was an engineer, he was the very first person he fired.
He was fired.
He was fired. And that brought some embarrassment at the time to the family. And then he hired him back when business started to pick up a little bit at the bottom level of their factory of Black & Decker as of sweeping the floors.
Holy hell.
Now that says more to me about the junior. The junior could have said, Mom!
Right.
He did it with a great attitude. He was grateful to have work. He was grateful that they were still in business, because a lot of companies, a lot of men and women had committed suicide during the Great Depression. People forget that. The death rate was off the charts.
Did you happen to look up the picture of Alonzo Decker Sr.?
No, it is. He's a handsome devil, I bet.
Yeah, but I can, listening to this story, it would have sounded like public relations nonsensory. Like, it would have sounded like a move for public relations, firing his son, until I saw a picture of him and realized he is everybody's disapproving grandpa put into one person.
He does look like a very stoic man.
Yeah, I was like, no, this asshole did it on purpose. Like, this is him firing his son because his son displeased him.
You kind of gotta like that, though, huh?
I do, yeah. So Junior did not collapse in tears or run to mom. He just started sweeping.
The happy ending on this, Joe, is he did end up a billionaire.
Okay.
So he didn't sweep floors for very long. Be a lesson for all of us.
Sweeping up his money now. Okay, so is there something we can take away from Alonzo Decker? Like, this originally was a narrative we were looking at for a different episode, but while reading this, we kind of figured out this is the same story as Bikram Yoga and Bikram's daughter, Chowdhury.
It's a choice how you deal with really tough situations.
I'm starting to believe that on occasion, if you have a super narcissistic parent, Bikram was a narcissist and was crazy, like a cult leader, but he did have those, those original yoga forms that he was believed in and other people believed in. It clearly had benefits. Decker invented freaking power tools, and his son became the floor sweeper for a while. It seems to me like if you have a narcissistic parent that is actually onto something, they have a little bit of genius.
Credibility.
Yeah. It feels to me like maybe having a narcissistic parent isn't a death knell. It doesn't mean you're going to be a wreck of a human. It means you can actually become better than them. Like you can take that skill and genius and add to it and add humbleness to it.
Because you already have that platform. When you were going over the different kind of people, I was going to ask you, how much of this is resources too? If this one narcissist had more money, would they be a bigger jerk?
Right. Yeah. Would
a bigger platform, a bigger stage?
Would the drunk baseball dad, if they had more money, would they be Bikram? Would their sons be like the most humble, well-rounded people on earth instead of just little jerks? So I guess to start addressing that question, we would ask, how do you start healing from having a narcissistic parent? Like whether you have a Alonzo Decker for a dad or a Bikram for a father, or if you just have a narcissistic mother who was covert, like if you just had the PTA mom, or if you had a parent who was just all about them. I guess the first step, and we're going to take this from the same article from The Mighty, so please look that up. First step is educate yourself. Seek professional help, set boundaries, cultivate safe relationships. Each one of those that I said those very quickly. Each one of those is a life step that takes months, if not years, to accomplish. And they kind of feel like a no-duh, but honestly, setting boundaries doesn't just mean learning boundaries. It means setting them with your parents as an adult. So that is something I wanted to ask of you, Todd. Have you ever had a discomfortable or uncomfortable conversation with your parents where you're like, here's a boundary, I need you to respect it?
I have, and I've had family members where I've had big breaks of time that I haven't been able to talk to them for 5-7 years. And I can honestly tell you, it's not easy to do, but once you do it, you're relieved that you did it, and it pays you back. You can really mend a lot. I mean, you got to think about your parents they've been in your head for a long time.
Totally. I think that as a child, you believe that you owe your parents nonstop communication and love throughout your life.
And that's how I felt. I felt I'm like a terrible kid. Even though I was grown up, I'm like, I'm abandoning them. And they've done so much for me. And they have.
That's exactly what it feels like. It feels like you're abandoning them, and it's through no fault of their own, that you're abandoning them for a personality disorder that they have. And instead of helping them, you're cutting them. But that is exactly what a boundary is, unfortunately. And it's more healthy to consider that. You don't necessarily have to cut off your parents, but setting a boundary, deciding how much or how little you want a narcissistic parent in your life. As a child, you weren't given a choice in the matter, but as an adult, you get to decide how much of them you see and how much is healthy for you to see.
And let me push back on that. Sometimes you do need to. And I'll give you a reason. If they start doing that same thing with your children, they don't deserve that. And if you can see it and you still allow that to do that, that's not okay to let this go on to another generation.
That is exactly why. It's not just for your own health, which that is definitely a good enough reason. It is also for the health of your children if you eventually have them, because unfortunately narcissistic parents don't change, and they will totally transfer that onto grandkids and great-grandkids. And the other part of this is to take time to assess what you want and need. So it's not just set boundaries for the sake of boundaries. It's also about doing this because you will have different needs as an adult than what you needed as a child. You may not have gotten the attention you needed when you were a kid. You may not have gotten the emotional growth you needed. But you can certainly decide what you need now that you're an adult. If that is an occasional phone call, that is totally up to you.
Or you may have spent your whole life not being listened to by your own family.
Right.
And you went out and found a partner that doesn't listen to you.
And you're now old enough to start your own yoga studio or run your own power tool shop. You don't need them. So the second part of this, and really to me, the peak of the iceberg for our show, why would we try to escape narcissistic parents? And why do we want to be Leju or Decker instead of a crazy genius narcissistic parent? Why be the well-rounded humble kid versus the narcissist? The narcissists sure seem to make a lot of money, and they sure seem to reap some of those benefits. Why go with being humble? Like, why transform yourself?
What's the return on investment on that?
Yeah, that's
What's
exactly.
your ROI?
You say that like a joke, but that is exactly the question we're asking. What is the return on investment of being humble, basically? So I'm going to quote from the Washington Post. They had an article back in 2016 called "Leaders Are More Powerful When They're Humble," and it's just all research and good statistics, and I love that.
Geeking out on this.
Oh, I totally am. We may want to do a episode all about being humble and what it does for you and how to do it. Because honestly, I lack a lot of these humility skills, and I wish we could teach this. So true humility, scientists have learned, is when somebody has an accurate assessment of both their strengths and weaknesses, especially in the context of like the world around them. Basically, if you can recognize your abilities and look around you and realize that you're coming up short, or you're perfectly skilled for something, or you could learn a few things from your surrounding. You know, if you are Alonzo Decker Jr. and you realize, yeah, you can learn something sweeping the floors of your parents' factory, that is humility, but it's useful humility. It shows you where you lack and where your gaps are and where you can shore those up.
Well, and the first time when I hear humble, I think of, bowing down or being thankful. But a lot of being humble, too, is recognizing what you're telling me is your strengths.
Yeah. I view humble as what Instagram has taught me humble is, which is first you say...
Grind hard.
Yeah, it's a brag. It's a humble brag. Oh, look, I'm so thankful for everybody. Here's all my money. Here's my beach house. No, true humility is just recognizing your strengths and weaknesses and admitting the weakness part out loud. You don't have to hide anything. Duke University did they did a test with 155 participants, and during this study, they sorted people from the humble to the arrogant. And the way they did this, we've talked about studies where they throw in bullshit into their test, and they see how confident people feel about made-up facts. For an example, in this test, they asked people about Susan B. Anthony and Mount Rushmore, and people felt pretty confident about those. They knew what they were. But then they'd ask things like, tell us about Hamrick's Rebellion, which is totally made up. Like, that is not a thing. And they were asked to report on how confident they are in their testing, in their decisions.
They're like, the year was 1826 and Hamrick's Rebellion.
They're like, oh, I'll tell you all about Hamrick's Rebellion, even though even the name of that sounds made up. And the intellectually humble, they found, took longer to read the statements. So, like, they took their time because they realized something was fishy. And at the end of the experiment, they were better at identifying the new statements. So if they felt like they had gotten something wrong, they were better at shoring up that weakness. The truly humble were able to, like, see that they had made a mistake and fix it. The arrogant, who tested as arrogant, They skimmed while they were reading. They were less accurate in identifying statements as new. They were positive that their wrong statements were correct. And they were more susceptible to fake news. So intellectually arrogant. They didn't know what they didn't know. The researchers observed something interesting too, that the humble folks that they were testing, they wanted to learn and improve. Like I said, they would actually stop and correct themselves. It wasn't just they took the test and they knew they had failed a few questions. They wanted to get into the ambiguity and the unknown. They enjoyed the new information. The humble college students they were testing, when they followed them, they found out this carried over to everything. They were higher academic achievers. They improved more over their semester. They got better grades. But that's not all. We're not just saying that if you can make yourself humble after having a narcissistic parent, that you'll be smarter and get better grades. That is the shallowest part of this pool. This study where they followed these kids, they found out everything in their life was better. If you are humble and you practice it, they're more pro-social. They built better connections. They were tolerant and more sensitive. They gave away more money throughout their lifetimes. In romance, they were rated as more attractive and date potential. The humble were less likely to use sex as a tool of manipulation.
Well, because they want to learn from their mistakes and they actually listen and they slow down. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, right?
It's funny you picked up on that too. Yeah, it's not just testing about Hamrick's made-up rebellion. It's, do you like that or don't you like that? You know, what am I doing wrong in the bedroom and how can I improve?
And what did I miss? What did you say that I missed? Why are you upset with me?
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. Emotionally, what did I miss? You know, what am I not picking up on? And the willingness to admit your own weaknesses. My God, how great is that in a partner?
My wife would never say that. She does, yeah.
This carried over to their work too. Our entire episode so far has really been about how narcissism affects children and work. Studies show that humble employees behave more ethically. They're more honest during negotiations. They're less likely to do anything to sabotage the company. Humility continues to be an asset even at the executive level. If you think this makes you naive, that I've got a little bit of news for you. In the Journal of Management Study, 105 computer software and hardware firms, humble CEOs were found to have reduced pay disparity between themselves and their staff, and they dispersed their power. Basically, they hired more diverse teams and they gave people the ability to lead and innovate. So humble leaders had less turnover and higher employee satisfaction, and they raised company performance.
That makes sense because then they're better at setting expectations because they've learned from the mistakes that they've made.
Right. We've done episodes about companies that hire. We did an episode all about the bank companies during the collapse. Specifically Dick Fuld, the leader of the collapse, basically. And we found out that quote-unquote charismatic leaders who are also narcissists and rule with, like, you know, are powerful leaders and you know, aggressive captains, they perform so much worse than leaders who rely on their staff and ask a lot of questions and seek out where their weaknesses are and take time. So this makes total sense looking back on that study that, yeah, a little bit of humility would help them. Being humble would basically make leadership raise everyone up. So here's the part where I was saying maybe we need a humble episode. It looks like humble people, I mean, almost literally enjoy all of the gifts of life, like everything that you would want in a partner or a CEO or a parent. That's a humble person.
I think we got to put that with trustworthiness. Humble and trustworthiness are our two our things we're trying to. We have a long ways to go, but it's just two things we're trying to get better at.
Right. Oh no, not me. I'm going for Bentleys, and you know, I'm running a yoga studio now. I just want to tell people about how cool it is to be humble and trustworthy. I am aiming for tigers and cocaine.
Yeah, Joe didn't care about me doing a yoga until he found out he could make $75 million to get a Bentley. Now for some reason he wants to go with me this Tuesday.
Right. Yeah. Let's get in our poses, Todd.
It may seem odd to compare the narcissism of parents with the humility of their children, but it seems to bear out that high achievers often come from parents who have lost sight of their narrative, their own self-worth. Behind so many successful men and women, there are dance moms and Hollywood dads, parents who desperately crave achievement and validation, but can't get it for themselves, so they lean on their kids. If you come from a narcissistic parent, we have a message to pass on to you. You can set boundaries. Because parents have done a lot of things for us, we allow them to do a lot of things to us. It's up to you to decide how much time and energy you want to give to a narcissistic parent, even if that's just a friendly call on the birthdays and holidays. It is not your heritage to feel guilty over a parent. Respect them, but decide how much contact is healthy for you. You are not your mother. You are not your father. Everything you've accomplished in your life is your own. Surviving family trauma is an achievement in itself. So every trophy, plaque, and award you've got beyond that, it's yours. All yours. And if you picked up the gift of humility along the way, then you represent the best of us. You've been listening to The Re-Engineered You. Thank you so much for listening to the show. You mean the world to us. We have a new episode every week.
You can connect with us at www.re-engineeredyou.com. That's where we have research links, show notes, and blog articles for each of our episodes. We also appreciate feedback, and we love spirited debates.
We're not experts in anything, but we've got an opinion on everything.